Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. You know, everyone wants to be used by Yahweh in some kind of way. However, what are we doing to make ourselves available for Him? You see, the Father doesn't look at our abilities. He wants to know if we are willing to serve Him by pursuing obedience to Him. He can provide the necessary gifts when needed, but He won't ever force anyone to obey. Hebrews chapter 12. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Do you struggle against sin? Or do you give in the second any temptation comes your way? Are you easy prey for the enemy? I can remember playing a volleyball team that was very competitive. In order to beat them, our captains told us to watch for the links, those who were the weak links on the opposing team, the lesser skilled players, if you will. Those would be our targets for that night, and it worked every time. Even when the more talented players of that opposing team tried helping their teammates, they left their positions vulnerable as well. So again, I ask, are you easy prey for the enemy? Please know, your sin doesn't just affect you. It has the potential of affecting many all around you. It seems the problem is many like to categorize sin. We tend to believe that this sin isn't going to be that bad, and then that sin, well, that's not really that bad either, compared to this sin or that. The question then becomes, as I've said before, how bad does bad have to be until bad is considered bad? Sounds confusing, I know. The bottom line is that sin is sin, and sin is disobedience to Yahweh's word, the Torah. 1 John 3:4. Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. Sin is breaking the Torah, Yahweh's instructions for living. John then continues, verse 5, But you know that He appeared so that He might take away our sins, disobedience to the Torah. And in Him is no sin, disobedience to the Torah. No one who lives in Him keeps on sinning, disobeying the Torah. No one who continues to sin, disobeying the Torah, has either seen Him or known Him. Those are some pretty strong words, almost hard to imagine even. But the fact is, anyone who wants to cling to and continue in a habitual sin has not decided to fully commit to Yahweh. It's one thing to fall to a sin. It's completely different to justify and have no desire to remove habitual sin. When the Father convicts someone's heart of a sin and they refuse to remove it, in the eyes of the Father, they've really never come to Him. Like the Pharisees, they're only cleaning the outside of the cup, but not the inside. And it will be those people that Yeshua says, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. The problem is, many times we departmentalize sin into our own categories. We tend to believe the little stuff won't hurt us. But that's our definition of little stuff. Problems can also come when an individual tries to help another in overcoming sin. They can find themselves falling to that same sin as a result. It's as if they have taken the key to the prison cell that their friend is in, but instead of setting their friend free, they join them in the cell instead. That's why Paul wrote in Galatians chapter 6, Brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you also may be tempted. And he encourages us to shine like the stars in the book of Philippians. So are you shining like the stars? Or are you blending into the darkness around you as you justify your deeds of darkness? Also, Romans chapter 13. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Ephesians chapter 5. Have nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. We shouldn't want to live on the edge of sin. We're supposed to get away from it, not set up camp right next to it. Put yourself on the edge of temptation long enough, and the enemy won't stop until you're over the line. Remember, temptation doesn't slap you in the face. It reaches out to shake your hand. It wants to make you think it's okay. It's believed that shaking hands actually began in the Dark Ages as a sign to say, I come in peace with no weapon in my hand. And that's just what the enemy wants you to think, that he's not going to hurt you. It's called deception. Hebrews chapter 3. But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. The very nature of sin is deceit. Sin tells you it's okay, when in reality, it's not. All too often, people will begin down a path of disobedience thinking it's okay. And most always, that disobedience starts off small, of course. And then, every day we stay on that path of disobedience, we grow more numb to that sin, more hard of hearing the Father's voice, and more callous and blind to His call on our life. And to think it all started with a harmless handshake. It's time for Yahweh's people to stop being a thermometer and start being a thermostat. A thermometer simply adjusts to the environment that it's in. A thermostat changes the environment that it's in. I used to call it chameleon Christianity. Have you ever been to the dentist and he gives you a shot to numb your mouth? He then proceeds to do his work. All the while you feel virtually no pain. Yet, at the same time, you know something is going on. It's very similar to this in the spiritual realm. The more we persist in disobedience, the more we become numb and losing our sensitivity to the Father. Compare Ephesians chapter 4. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. Now, you may be thinking, I haven't lost all sensitivity. But my question is, do we want to lose any sensitivity at all? Do we really want to wake up one day and be like Samson? Judges 16. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that Yahweh had left him. What a scary thought. We know that Samson kept compromising. And here we see the end result of that compromise. Yeshua said in John 8, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Are you a slave to sin? Only you can answer that. Don't be like Samson and have that sin overtake you one day that you thought you had under control. This walk we're given is not a call to convenience. It's a call to holiness. One more time. This walk we're given is not a call to convenience. It's a call to holiness. As the book of Hebrews says, make every effort to live in peace with all men and be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Holiness is not just separation from evil. It's separation unto Yahweh. Let me say that again. Holiness is not just separation from evil. It's separation unto Yahweh. Please understand that separation from the world is great. But again, it's separation unto Yahweh that makes you holy. So what do we allow in our lives that shouldn't be there? I once had an individual tell me, I'm mature enough, I know how to handle it. And I thought to myself, mature enough? And immediately the thought of 1 Corinthians 14 came to my mind. Brothers, stop thinking like children. In regard to evil, be infants, but in your thinking, be adults. In regard to evil, be infants. So what does that mean? Well, think of it this way. Many years ago, when I was still a teenager, I remember listening to a CD in my room. Now, my brother was over with his family, and my 2-year-old niece heard the music, and she came into my room and started dancing to the music. It was really funny. But the next song then came on, and though the song was actually a really funny song, it kind of started out with some eerie music and eerie sounds to it. My niece's face went from joy and laughter to immediate fear. In regards to evil, be infants. Anytime something that seems evil is presented, a little one gets scared. That's how we should be as well. We should avoid every kind of evil, as Thessalonians says. Should we really believe we are strong and mature enough to handle something Yahweh considers evil? Several years ago, I remember visiting family in the mountains of Upper Washington State, 1 mile south of the Canadian border. One morning, I went out for a walk, and I was holding 2 rather large sticks in my hand as I was constantly on the lookout for cougars. Not a cool thing. But I was taking soft steps and always looking around. I eventually came upon a deer, actually a rather large buck, and I simply froze. I didn't move, and it didn't see me. Then, of all things, I had to scratch my nose. I'm going, really? Are you kidding me? It just overtook me, So I lifted my hand as slowly as I could, and the deer perked up and looked right at me. And again, I just froze. But it began walking away from me, constantly looking back at me as it faded into the brush. It took no chances. No chances at all. The second it even sensed danger, it left. How careful are we in our spiritual walk every day? 1 Peter 5:8. Be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Do we take this verse seriously? How are we walking? Are we like that deer that sees something and immediately goes away from it? Or do we think we're strong enough and we can handle it? Do we walk around soft and careful, or tunnel visioned and careless, thinking we're strong enough to handle whatever comes our way? If we think we are that strong, please remember 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So, if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. Later that day, I took my children for a walk a little closer to the cabin. In fact, we actually stayed on the driveway that was just a mile long. My children noticed me carrying my big sticks, and my oldest one eventually said, "Daddy, what are you looking for?" And I simply responded with, "Danger." Then she said, I'll help. And she picked up a stick, and then she's thinking she's helping. She's just walking along, la, 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 thinking she's helping out. Ephesians chapter 5. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Are we always on the alert? Or are we like my daughter, just holding a stick in our hand, thinking we're doing good, but not really paying attention to the world around us, to our situations around us, and how they can be harmful to us? How seriously do we take sin? How seriously do we take this verse? Can sin hinder your relationship with Yahweh? Consider Psalm 66. If I had cherished sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. It's our view of sin that needs to be examined. Do we protect it and keep people from seeing it? Or do we abhor it and strive to eliminate it from our life? In Luke 15, we read the story of the prodigal son. Let's review a small portion of it. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Notice his confession. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Against heaven and against you. Compare David's confession. Psalm 41. I said, O Yahweh, have mercy on me. Heal me, for I have sinned against you. Until we view sin as an offense against Yahweh, we don't view it right. Let me say it again. Until we view sin as an offense against Yahweh, we don't view sin correctly. 1 John chapter 1. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. How can we have fellowship with him if we are walking in darkness? Even if it's just a, quote, little darkness. It's interesting to note how the author of Hebrews was very clear in saying that sin is not the only thing that can hold you back in the Lord. Compare Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. There may be things in your life that are not sin, but you know they are only holding you back in your walk with the Father. As discussed in 1 Corinthians, one might say, everything is permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. Paul is quoting the Corinthians and giving his response to them. Is this a phrase you've said or thought? Is there something in your life that's truly not beneficial for you? Is there something in your life that has truly mastered you? Oh, sure, it's not sin, but at the same time, it doesn't belong in your life. Have you ever considered asking the Father to reveal those kinds of things that may be in your life? It's time for everyone to be honest with themselves. Have you ever written your sins down on a piece of paper? I encourage you to write your full name on the top of a piece of paper and begin listing the sin that you know you have in your life. It's hard to, because no one wants to see what they look like in black and white. However, ignoring reality will get us nowhere. Just because you don't want to look at it doesn't mean Yahweh isn't writing it down. Not looking at your sin in black and white doesn't make it go away. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You might feel better about yourself by not looking at it. But please remember, Romans chapter 12. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. Now then, take a piece of paper, write your full name on it, and start listing your sin along with those things that are in your life that may not be sin, but you know they're keeping you entangled. Be honest. Don't deceive yourself. Seriously. You might deceive a friend. You might deceive a relative, but don't try to deceive yourself. You are who you are when no one's looking. When done, pray, confess, repent. Then take that piece of paper and burn it, representing your decision of getting rid of all the sin from your life, never to be found again. James said, the prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. Do you want your prayers to be powerful and effective? Do you want to be used by Yahweh? 2 Timothy chapter 2. If a man cleanses himself from the latter, he will be an instrument for noble purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. The context here is talking about turning away from wickedness. The Father wants to use us. He longs to use us. But if we are holding on to any sin or allowing something to have mastery over us, it will, at the very least, limit how He uses us. It will have potential in causing Him to not use us at all. It's time to be used by the Father. Make that your prayer today and every day, to be used by Yahweh. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.